Hi, welcome back to the Chris Ott Show, and this is episode 4, and I am here with my guest Ann McEvoy.
Hi.
And I've known you about 6 years because that's when I came back from Arkansas, and you were already living here, and you were very friendly and very funny, and I got to know you quickly, and. You're the first guest. Okay, my first couple guests were born into Baba, so they have no history before they were Baba lovers. My third guest, Kathy Riley, she had written a book, so it was about that. We're talking about a 12-year period in her life, so it didn't have to do with coming to Baba. And my feeling about these shows was what had been, and I told you, that. The standard Mayor Baba video would be, tell me your Baba story. How'd you come to Baba? And I am interested in that, but to be different and to be unique, and maybe it's not so unique, maybe maybe people have done this, but I'm interested. I want to emphasize your life before Baba. I want to sort of build who you were, even like your family. What was the religious life? Because later you were going to make this big decision about Mayor Baba. So I want to know, what were you exposed to about God and things like that and philosophy as a kid? And then where did your life go? And I want to hear the whole hoary past. And then, how those events could lead into an unusual change that a lot of people have made, and they found Mayor Baba and they took him seriously. So,
Okay.
So let's just start with you. You just tell me your story.
Okay. Start out, I was born to an Irish Catholic father and a Swedish Baptist Protestant mother in Worcester, Massachusetts. My dad was an alcoholic, and my mom kicked him out when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that alcoholic child background. Then this was during the Depression, and she had to work all hours in a box factory. So she couldn't take care of my sister and I. I have a sister 4 years older. So we were put in foster homes.
Mm-hmm.
Only there weren't such things at that time. This is in like 1938. So she found a family that would take us in. There wasn't any state intervention. The first foster home was really nice. It was an older couple, they had a cow. And I'm mentioning that because it just came to my mind. When we were just there to meet them, I loved animals. So I was out in the barn petting the cow. And the cow was eating the hay on the ground, and my skirt got caught in it. And the cow ate me up to its mouth, skirt and all. It was a wonderful experience. Anyway, the man in that family got sick, and we had to move to another foster home that was a foster home from hell.
Mm.
And we were there for a couple years, 2.5 years. And it was a very bad experience for both my sister and I. The man he had mental problems, I assume. I remember, and I'm only 3 or 4, his putting his son out in the cold overnight, barefoot, because he'd done something wrong, without a coat or anything. I got hit by a car and got spanked for it. And just very bad things. Then my mother remarried. She married a man much older than her, who she had worked for as a housekeeper as his wife was dying. And then they got married right before I turned 6. And we moved from Massachusetts, where we were living, to Indiana, where he had a job. And I spent the next few years on an Army ordnance plant, where they made bombs and bullets and stuff. So instead of being on the East Coast where you had blackouts, I would wake up in the middle of the night with a phone call and hear, oh, there's sabotage on the lines, and my stepfather would have to go deal with it. those were okay years, but I really didn't like my stepfather, and he didn't like me.
Mhm.
He had,
So why didn't he like you?
well, he didn't like me because when he and my mother married, they were very clear, and they told us all the time we lived at home why they married each other.
Yeah.
He married my mother because he always wanted little girls, and he had 2 grown sons.
Yeah.
She married him because she wanted us back from the foster
Oh.
homes. So it wasn't a marriage based in love. He didn't like me because I wasn't that sweet little girl. I was a tomboy.
Oh, okay.
And I was rather outspoken, I guess. I am now. I assume I was then.
Well, it's a good thing he didn't have this dream come true, have the girl, because he wasn't really cut out for girls.
Yeah, well, he got along great with my sister.
Oh, okay.
She loved him very much.
Oh, okay, she was more what he was looking for.
She was what he was looking for. I wasn't.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, those years were, I wasn't very popular. And that hurt even then, as a young kid.
Why weren't you popular? Were you funny looking? Were you awkward?
I had buck teeth.
Buck teeth? Well, that'll do it. It'll make you look funny.
It
Especially
made me
in
look
school.
funny.
Yeah, anything that makes you look funny.
And I was
People
kind
that are
of
too
rough.
tall are unpopular
Yeah,
in school.
I was I was a tomboy, and that
Mhm.
wasn't accepted with the general's daughters and the colonel's daughters and all
Mhm.
that jazz,
Mhm.
I guess.
Mhm.
So my dad, after 3 years, we moved to Indiana. No, we were in Indiana. We moved to Ohio. He was mentally disturbed, my stepdad, and he got great jobs and got 3-year contracts, and at the end of the 3 years, we always had to move because he always got let go as soon as his contract was up. Okay, a couple things. You had asked about my family's religious orientation. My mom was a Swedish Baptist, raised Swedish Baptist, which made Southern Baptists look ultra-liberal. And she was not an introspective woman, so she believed what she was taught, and she was coming from that perspective. When she married my father, my stepfather, they were in a regular mainline Protestant church, eventually wound up in a Presbyterian one. I was sent to Sunday school, and I loved it.
Oh,
I loved Jesus
like
so
Erich.
much.
Erich loved Sunday school. I mean,
Did
like
he?
he loved hearing about Jesus.
Yeah, and I just loved it. It was the only place I ever felt love.
Huh.
It was from Jesus,
Wow.
because I didn't feel it at home.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. And my mother said I used to throw temper tantrums if I was sick or something and couldn't go to Sunday school. That's how strong that was.
Wow.
And that's important because of the next part. While we were living in Indiana, I used to go over, sometimes with my family and sometimes alone, to this family that were friends of my folks.
Yeah.
And they had 3 boys. I was probably 5 or 6, and they were like 12, 16, and 18, something like that. Well, they raped me over a period of months.
Mhm.
And I knew it was wrong, or maybe it was just sex play, I don't remember. I knew it was wrong, like eating ice cream before dinner was wrong, but that was the level of my awareness. And then my mother found out, and she took me for a ride in the car, and she told me I was going to hell, God would never forgive me, and there was nothing I could do about it. And that set the stage for the rest of my life until I came to Baba.
Mhm.
I tried killing God in every which way I could.
I don't.
Well, he's going to
That-
send
it
me to
doesn't-
hell.
Okay, but all right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't make, okay. So it's like it causes mental incontinence. Yeah. It's yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's just a phrase I think of now. How does one kill God? I wanted nothing to do with religion, although my parents forced me to go until I was 13, 14. But back now, we left Indiana. Now I'm this wounded kid who's going to hell, in my mind.
Yeah.
And that really took. I mean, I believed that.
Right.
Then we moved to Ohio, and it was the first time that I ever made a friend.
Mm-hmm.
It was a girl that was in my class, and I was there from 4th through 6th grade. And her father was superintendent of schools, and they had a farm. He had a tenant farmer operating it. But I used to go over and say, "Can I stay for dinner?" And they'd let me. And then when they'd go to the farm, they'd take me. And I'd ride the pony, and I'd pet the cows and feed the pigs, and I loved that. But at home, it was miserable. My stepdad was always after me. And my mother, too. Although I think, in retrospect, what I've decided was my mother was trying desperately to please my stepfather. And he thought I was bad. In fact...
So they were always after you, meaning they were always criticizing?
Oh,
Trying
constantly.
to correct you, and yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you more about that when we get to New Jersey.
Okay.
Because I remember more there. But she went along with him, so it was like everybody's against me. It was, and I remember at school, I had a great teacher in 6th grade, and the principal, Mr. Kennedy and Mrs. Torrance, knew that I was a wounded kid, and they were super sweet to me.
Mm.
And I got put on the school patrol and so on. And the Dockhams, that was my girlfriend's parents, were okay with me too. So I had some shelter from the storm. Home was a storm. And I was a good kid.
Did your parents, your stepfather and your mother, did they argue with each other?
Yes.
Oh, they did too. So that's a little storm too. Yeah.
Yes, that's a
Because
storm
that's really
too.
hard. It's really hard on all kids when it's a stormy house.
Right, it was a stormy house.
Not just that you're being criticized, because.
Right, no, it wasn't just that. But no, they didn't get along very well. But my mother tried to please him,
Yeah.
not realizing until later that he was mentally ill. But anyway, after his contract expired in Ohio, he got a job as chief engineer of Red Top Brewery in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved there.
Do they still exist?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think.
I have no
I
idea.
don't think so. Yeah.
And that was the end of 6th grade that we moved there. I was heartbroken because I was leaving my friends, my one friend, and they let my sister stay in Ohio to finish her year in high school, but they wouldn't let me stay.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
I was just, by then, I have realized just recently that rape situation had put a label, a bad girl, on me.
Uh-huh.
It's like I wore a scarlet BG instead of a scarlet A. And
So they brought you
everything,
along to keep an eye on you?
yeah, probably.
Oh, okay.
And in Trenton, it got worse. My dad used to, well, the first house we lived in, we rented until they could find a place to buy. And the bedroom I was in was not much bigger than a closet. And that's okay, that's all that was there. But I was supposed to clean my room, and I never could make the mop go with the room, so I didn't get under my bed. My stepfather would hold down the receiver on the phone and call the police and tell them to come get me, take me to reform school.
Mm. Was he joking?
No, no.
Sounds like a joke, yeah.
And I used to wish that he'd do it.
Oh, he would threaten to do it. Oh, he would be holding down the button.
The receiver,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, right.
And I just thought, oh, please send me to reform school.
You know, young people wouldn't even know what that meant, holding down the button.
Oh, that's right,
They
because you don't do
Cell
that
phones don't
today.
have those, you know.
Cell phones don't have that. It's
Yeah.
the old kind of dial phone.
Yeah, if you hold down the button, there's nobody really hearing you.
Right.
You're not really calling the police.
Right. So, junior high, more trouble at home. I still had to go to church. Church, not Sunday school, and it was a Presbyterian hellfire and damnation church, which made me want to go. But then I got to junior high, and kids teased me, buck teeth, and I was afraid of boys. And
You don't seem to have buck teeth. Did you eventually have them worked on? Or you grew out of it? What
these
happened?
are false teeth.
Oh, that final. Took a long time to get back there. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, I made my first New Jersey friend in 9th grade.
Yeah,
We are still friends.
yeah.
She has moved to Columbia, South Carolina from New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
And
Oh, that's convenient.
yeah, it is. Anyway, she and I, and her parents were very good to me. Another set of parents coming to the rescue.
Mm-hmm.
And they always left a window open. And when it got too tough at my house in the evening, I'd leave. And I'd go up to Molly's, it was only about a mile away.
Yeah,
And I'd climb in the window and go up to her bedroom and go to bed with her.
yeah.
So, and she'd often be asleep, but they made it so that I had an escape valve.
Mm-hmm.
So Molly and I did little girl things, just teenage stuff. We weren't bad kids. We cut school some,
Mm-hmm.
but, oh, yeah, cutting school in high school. The kids I dated were kids of the mafia, sons of mafia people.
Mm. Where was it?
Trenton, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
My mother wanted me to date boys from the church.
Mhm.
I tried that.
But I thought mafia boys would be going to the church. Oh, no, Catholic. They'd be going to
They'd
Catholic
be going to
church.
Catholic school. I tried that, and they were not gentlemen at all.
Mm-hmm.
They'd try to rape you or whatever.
Mm.
And I said, no more church guys. So Molly, and Molly had a crush on this guy in the mafia, who's kid of the mafia, so we started hanging out with them. And those guys, to us, were gentlemen. We told them we were virgins, which we were. Well, I don't know if I was a virgin.
You can't really remember all the
Because
what
of the
happened.
rape.
Or sex,
Yeah.
or sex play.
Right. But we didn't do that, and the guys accepted it.
Yeah.
And we never brought them home.
Well, you know, in the Italian Catholics, the virginity is real high. The Virgin Mary.
I hadn't thought of that, but
yeah, that's a big
they
thing.
respected us.
Mhm.
And we went out with them. They didn't come to our houses and pick us up.
Oh.
My parents would never have put up with that.
Oh, so you met him somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, all this could look pretty suspicious, I'd have to say. Slipping off in the middle of the night to your friends, they don't know where you are. Slipping off with the mafia looks pretty bad. I'm not saying it was, but it could look. If you had a private detective following you around, you go, oh, it's worse than you know. Okay, go on.
Well, I had something I wanted to put in, and I forgot
Oh,
what it was.
maybe you'll remember
It'll
it.
come back.
If you want me to pause the camera and you think a minute? No, that won't
Yeah,
help. Okay,
maybe.
let's just think a second.
Okay.
I might have confused you when I.
Oh, that's okay. It'll either come back or it won't. So
Okay,
we'll go
let's just
on.
continue then.
Okay, so we're in high school, we're dating kids of the mafia. We were both very active in sports.
Hmm.
The
That's
school
healthy.
had a sports night.
What sport was your sport?
Well, my main sport was swimming and diving.
Oh,
I was
nice.
a swimmer and diver from junior high all the way through high school.
Mm.
But I also played city league basketball and baseball,
Hmm. Wow. Was it baseball or softball?
softball.
Yeah.
And I just loved sports.
Mm.
And I was good at it. Pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. And so after school, I didn't usually get home till 6 o'clock because we had swimming practice.
Yeah.
But then, one time, it was our senior year of high school. And I'm still anti-God. I mean, really. But we decided to borrow her dad's car and go find out where this guy she had a crush on was. So we did. We borrowed his car and went outside his house and see, and he didn't come home, and eventually we returned the car. Well, she got in trouble for taking the car, and I got in big trouble. It's like, you can't go to your own graduation. You're grounded for 6 months, which that didn't last, but anyway, it was not good. I was in all these swimming meets and sports night at high school. My parents never came to see me. They came to see everything my sister was in. And that hurt a lot. So, finish high school, angry girl. And the summer that I finished high school, I got a job in Long Island.
Yeah.
As a nanny for a little girl.
Yeah.
Only it didn't work out that I was a nanny.
Uh-huh.
They used me as a maid and a chauffeur, which was okay.
Yeah.
So I was up in Hyannisport for the summer.
Kids are annoying.
Yeah. Anyway, I came back and I decided I wanted to go to college. And I'd spent the money that I had saved for college from my allowance and stuff and jobs I had, because I worked from the time I was 10.
Ooh.
But I'd spent that buying a car and buying Molly and I each a coat, a 6-button Benny, which was the mafia's
The thing. Oh,
the thing.
fitting in with the mafia. Never heard of that kind of type of coat. I'll look it up.
6-button Benny.
6-button Benny.
So I decided I wanted to go to college. My folks weren't about to help me. They
Yeah.
sent my sister to a fine, very expensive finishing school, 2-year
Yeah.
college.
Fairness wasn't their thing.
No, fairness wasn't their thing. But, so where was I? I've lost my track.
Okay, so you had saved your money, and then you bought a car and you bought the coats. Your parents weren't going to help you for college, so then I think this.
Right. There was a junior college in town, Trenton Junior. Well, being the brazen kid that I was, things didn't scare me.
Ah.
They still don't,
Oh, good.
other than my parents.
Oh. But yeah.
I went in before school started and said, I want to come to your school, but I don't have any money. But I'll work really hard, and I'll pay you every day I get paid, and I've got several jobs. Because I did. I worked in a bookstore. I worked in a drugstore behind the counter. I had 3 or 4 different jobs.
See, today you could borrow $100,000, so that would solve your problem.
Yeah,
Then you have to
right.
kill yourself and get out of school.
There you go. Anyway, they said I could come.
Yeah,
And
that's great. So you worked your way
I
through
worked my
community
way
college.
through community college, and there I made a number of good friends.
Yeah.
Including one of my professors.
You know, community colleges are very well respected by people who actually follow education. Sometimes you get a better education because they have more time.
This
I don't
was
know if that
great.
was true then, but it's true today. You're
It was
sometimes
true
better
then.
off. Yeah.
And I had many friends. There were a couple hundred guys and 20 gals, because it was primarily an engineering school.
Oh.
But they had a life science section, and I was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh, it was a science college.
Yeah. So, Doc and I he was great. He was one of my professors.
Yeah.
And on holidays, he would have me come up to his farm in North Jersey, where he and his wife had a farm. And she was also a teacher at the university, or at the college.
Yeah.
and I'd work on the farm. I loved it.
Ah, should have been a farmer.
I should have been a farmer. I loved it, and Doc was so good to me. And Molly's mom was still, that's my friend from ninth grade, was still really good to me and supportive. So, junior college, I made the dean's list, and then I fell in love the second year.
Oh,
And I fell in love with a Polish Catholic guy,
no, student there?
a student. He was a Korean War vet, and he had come back on the GI Bill. And we just were so in love, and we got engaged.
So this is the late 50s?
57.
Yeah.
And I remember getting engaged. We were at a formal dance at this place, and there was a lake there and a pier going out to it. And we were out on the pier when Joe proposed, and I think they were playing Begin to Begin.
Dang, did anybody take pictures?
Not of us on the pier. They took pictures of us.
Then you got back, or
Yeah.
at the party?
That was so wonderful.
Yeah.
My parents broke it up.
Oh, how could they do that?
Well, I don't know. They put such pressure on me because my parents, they were Republican. Anyone who is not Northwestern European was no good.
Well, that's not a Republican platform
That's
position.
any Irish,
Yeah,
well,
but-
Irish were out because they were
Oh.
Catholic. But Poles, Slavics, any of those
So a
Italians.
religious thing, yeah.
I guess. I never thought of it as religious. But my dad put pressure on me by saying, I've been invited to be a deacon in the church, and I can't if my daughter's going to marry a Catholic. And girls of my age at that time,
Yeah,
there weren't many of us who could stand up to their parents the way.
and just elope back then. Well, you didn't have the resources to.
No,
You know, it is important to have, for a couple, to have the parents on their side, unless they're super rich or.
right.
that.
And they,
Because I know that with my daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
I
pa-
support her marriage and his parents, and so
And
that
that's good.
really, really,
well,
made
Joe's
sense.
parents were poor.
yeah.
And my parents just, so I guess, I don't know. Well, they didn't break it off right then. When it happened, okay, I have to backtrack a bit. When I was 17, I think I was 17, high school, my grandmother died
Yeah.
in Massachusetts.
Uh-huh.
So we went up to the funeral.
Yeah.
And we went back and forth because my mother's family a lot of her family was still in Massachusetts. And while we were there, my sister and I had talked about we would like to see our father, who was out of the picture since I was 3. And so we took the car purportedly to do something. We didn't say what we were going to do. And we went to Framingham, where the last place we had heard that our father lived, and went into a drugstore to use their phone book to see if we could find a James McEvoy listed. And my sister still remembered what he looked like.
Oh, you did? She could still remember at that point. Okay.
Yeah.
She was older.
She was 4 years older than I.
Yeah.
And he was sitting at the counter in the
Huh.
drugstore.
Amazing.
So we went up to him,
Mm.
one on either side,
Mm.
and one of us tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hi, I'm Barbara." And the other one said, "Hi, I'm Ann." And he then took us across the street to a nicer restaurant, and we all sat down and talked.
Oh.
And that was the beginning of a lifelong relationship with him.
Oh, good.
He was, as best I can describe him, an Irish leprechaun.
Mm.
He was charming.
Mm-hmm.
He was adorable.
Mm. Was he really an alcoholic?
I don't know.
Yeah, probably not.
I never saw him.
Might have been what your mother
Well,
told you.
no,
So get him so that you wouldn't go looking for him?
She said when he was young, he had DTs and the police would bring him home. And he
Oh,
was
well,
crawling
yeah,
out.
but it had
But by the time we met him, I saw him, he seldom without a drink in his hand.
okay,
But I never saw him what I
Right.
would consider drunk.
right.
So I don't know what
It's all
that's
right.
about.
Right, don't know.
Anyway, we had that relationship.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd go up to see him every year for a weekend or something.
Mhm.
And then after junior college, I was up there seeing him.
We kind of lost track of, you were engaged and your parents broke that up, but then you went back.
Well,
Went to
now,
how you had a relationship at that time with your dad, so that's.
right, this fits in,
Okay, good.
it fits in here.
Put it all in.
I had no money, and I had just graduated from the junior college.
Yeah,
He said he would pay for me for my next year of college.
okay.
Now, this is interesting, the choice of colleges. I had applied to the University of Connecticut and got accepted,
Mhm.
but I also had applied to a Christian college because I really wanted to get back the love of Christ that I had as a little kid.
Huh,
So I went to the Christian college, Maryville College in Tennessee.
maybe you were really kind of killing God to see if God would come back, would figure out how to get you back.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you never really lost your
I
heart
didn't.
connection with Jesus.
I
That it was just sort of like you were bitter at your mother, and where she said you're going to hell, and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we'll make that about God. But the fact is, you wouldn't have had that thought later. It
Right.
wasn't always. It never really went away.
It never really
And
went
I'd
away,
say
but
you
I
weren't mad
tried.
at God. You're mad at your mom.
Yeah, well,
But if God had
consciously-
anything to do with her, then the hell with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I went to Maryville. It was
Yeah.
a terrible experience.
Oh, no, was this the Christian school or the, okay,
was the
it was a
Christian
terrible experience, okay.
It was a terrible experience.
Mm.
But while I was there is when my dad put pressure on me to break up the engagement,
Your stepdad.
my stepdad. And,
So you were engaged a pretty long time?
well,
For a year?
no, we got engaged the end of my second year of college.
Yeah.
And I broke it off early in my
Oh, okay, so a few
third
months.
year, yeah. So Joe came to see me. It was wonderful, but then I had to tell him, I can't marry you.
Mm.
And he couldn't believe it, so I said, I don't love you. I lied, because I still love him.
Strange. Well, it's the hoary past.
Yeah, so anyway.
That's sad.
I
Sorry.
broke up with him.
Yeah, that could create a real regret. One of those
Oh.
love regrets are the
Yeah,
worst.
yeah. But I went, the first year, I mean, this school was so bad, you couldn't ride in cars because they were passion pits. You
They might have been.
You couldn't wear red because red was an exciting color to guys. You couldn't wear patent leather shoes
never
because
thought it
guys
was.
would look up your dress.
Oh,
They had dances every night after dinner, but
Should've
you had
won.
to
Uh-huh.
dance 3 feet apart. And they came around with a yardstick and measured.
no, that's not too unusual. Yeah.
There were so many things.
Yeah.
So some of us from the Northeast wanted to go home for Thanksgiving, just to get away from this place.
Yeah.
We had to have our parents lie,
Hmm?
because
What-
you
what-
weren't allowed to ride in cars. We were
Oh,
all
so
gonna
they-
go in one guy's car.
Oh.
So even I said, I've got to come home for Thanksgiving. Please send a telegram that somebody died, or something, I forget what the excuse was.
Uh-huh.
But I got permission to go.
Okay.
And 3 or 4 of us drove back east, and whoever's car it was dropped us off at the various homes. So then I went on for the 2 years, and I found so much hypocrisy and bigotry They are a Christian college. They burned a
Yeah.
cross when they,
Yeah.
or they allowed the KKK.
And you
to burn
didn't
a
have
cross.
Baba at the time to be able to differentiate religion from
No,
God.
I didn't have
Yeah, and who
Baba.
would? Why would you have that? I mean, it sort of seems like they're the same thing, because that's how the world presents it.
Right.
In every religion, by the way.
Yeah,
So,
I know, because religions.
Because
are-
religions, that's their job. That's we are God.
They support-
God. That's us. We're the God.
Right.
We're the God show.
Okay, so 2 years there, or 1 year there, rather, was terrible. And one of the reasons I went, aside from wanting to get back my love of Christ, was that they had a program where you could do a special project that would last the second semester junior year and the first semester of senior year, and I wanted to work on a medical issue. I'd had a friend die of, I can't remember what it was, a blood disease, and I wanted to do research on it, leukemia. And they wouldn't let me. It was too hard for the professor to have to monitor. So that was a and I was in Bible class. We had to take Bible. And because I came as technically a first semester or a second semester junior, because I'd gotten enough units in the junior college for 2.5 years of school.
Yes.
They wouldn't let me do the special project. I had to take all these Bible classes, and they were all presented from a real Calvinistic perspective. So I would challenge the instructor. And then I'd fall asleep and fall out of my chair and disrupt the class. And she was very upset with me, and finally we made a deal. If I'd behaved myself in class, she wouldn't expect me to participate or call on me or anything. And she'd pass me, so we got through that. But the whole thing was very unpleasant. And I was working, while I was there, I worked at the school. I was, we waited tables, and we had to provide our own knives for the table, and just stuff like that. That was okay. But then I decided I couldn't come back for my senior year. So I had applied to UT, University of Tennessee, in Knoxville.
What made you think of that? That's pretty far.
No, that was really close to Maryville.
Oh, okay.
And I liked the surroundings. Oh, the brochure for the college.
Oh, brochures.
Was in the.
I was always attracted
showed
to
the
brochures.
foothills of the Smokies and
Yeah.
how beautiful it was.
Yeah. Isn't that
We weren't allowed to
interesting?
go there.
Ah, yeah. Well, that it's funny though. I just remember as a kid, like brochures. That is like lusting of your. Like you'd go to a school for the brochure.
Yeah, right.
Because it looked beautiful.
Well, that was another
They
thing.
could
that
really
made me
fool
just-
young people.
Just mad.
We didn't know how to assess a school.
Oh, I know.
I mean, yeah.
Well, what do you know?
How do you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Today it's tough. Yeah. Go on.
Anyway, I'd applied and been accepted to UT.
Yeah.
But I had to have an interview there.
Yeah.
And because I was a waitress waiting tables, I only had the time between lunch and dinner to get to Knoxville, be interviewed, and get back. So one of the townies, that's a kid that lived in town, not on the campus, took me in his car. Well, the school found out, put me on probation. You rode in a car. I said, I can account for every minute of my time. That didn't matter. You rode in a car. I'm supposed to like this school? So I got really rebellious, and I would ride around the campus on the bumper of a truck and have them beep the horn in front of the president's house.
Mhm.
I'd go, "Nah."
Yeah.
I mean, I was so angry at this place.
Yeah.
And my folks, even though they didn't pay for it, wouldn't let me drop out because I wanted to. So that summer, after my first year, when I knew I wasn't going back, I was planning to go to UT, they'd accepted me. But I could graduate from UT in 1 semester if I got a year's worth of German. So I took a year's worth of German at Boston College, staying with my dad and his wife, my real dad. And partway through that, I got a letter from Maryville. saying I was not to be readmitted for at least 10 years, and they had stamped on my transcript that I was not to be readmitted for at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
UT rescinded.
Oh, there you got out of, you just said your parents weren't paying for it, but they wouldn't let you drop out, so you got what you wanted.
Yeah, they rescinded
You were honking
their
the horn, I
acceptance.
mean, you wanted to get out.
Oh,
So
I
now
did.
you were free.
Well, it wasn't that. I mean, I couldn't go to UT for my last
Because,
semester. They got the transcript.
right, sure, ruins the
And they said,
transcripts going
oh,
forward.
we're only 17 miles from, we can't accept you. That'd be bad PR.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it took me another 3.5 years to graduate.
Mhm.
But those 3.5 years were really interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Where, I thought you were not in the school at that point. They said that you,
right, I wasn't.
so how, what were you doing for 3.5 years to get your credits?
Well, let's see. I worked at De La Valle Steam Turbine as an engineering draftsman.
Mm-hmm. And you got credits?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, this was a job.
Oh, okay.
I had had mechanical drawing in high school, which I
Mhm.
loved. I was the first gal to take it.
Mm.
And all the guys said I had to be sleeping with the teacher because I got straight A's, because I was good at it. So I
Yeah.
got a job at it. It was boring after a few months after I'd learned what to do. But I did various jobs, and I went to school nights or part-time days. I went to Rutgers, Rutgers University, Trenton Junior College. And when I was at Rutgers, I met a guy who rescued me all the time. He was my rescuer.
Mhm.
My car was always breaking down. I had this old
Oh.
jalopy, and I bought dollar tires for it
They don't exist anymore.
that were always going flat. And I'd,
Yeah.
on a freeway between Trenton and New Brunswick,
You were buying the tires that people had thrown away.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd always call Alan, and he'd come and get me. And then he wanted me to marry him, and I said, but Alan, I don't love you. And he said, you'll learn to love me.
Men always say that.
Oh, God, it was,
That's our thing.
and I before that, I had been living with, I'd finally talked my sister into moving out
Yeah.
from my parents' home. Now, she's 4 years older. She's still living at home. They teased her mightily about being an old maid. But my mother said, don't ever leave. I can't stand your father. And he'd say, oh, don't ever leave. I couldn't be here just alone with your mother. So they
Yeah.
kept her there
It's called a double bind.
and teased her.
Yeah.
So I had
Don't
finally,
leave, but you're becoming an old maid, you know.
right. Well, I'd finally talked her into leaving, and we got an apartment together.
Mm. Good.
And while we were in the apartment is when I got engaged to Alan, because I was teaching school. Aha, that's right. I got a job teaching special ed
Mm.
in the time when nobody knew anything about retarded kids.
Mm.
But this school
Now
was,
it requires special education and
right,
everything.
I hadn't even
Right.
graduated college rather. I had three
Yeah,
and a half
it's
years.
not funny.
but-
Today you have to have a master's to do it.
Yeah, well, I taught in a Quonset hut. Most of my children were black. They were children of settled out migrants. They were adorable. I had kids 6 through 12. I had a little blind boy, and I had a schizophrenic kid and a catatonic kid that would go into these catatonic states. It was very interesting. Anyway, Alan and I, that's this Jewish man that proposed to me. Well, I accepted. I told him I'd get married. And then I told my sister, and she was delighted.
Yeah.
So then as the time got closer, I realized I can't go through with this. Oh, back up. I had told my mom that I was going to get married. She said, where are you getting married? I said, I don't know. We've thought of a church and a synagogue. I don't know. And she said, we'll get married at home. I said, you're going to have to tell Pop, because he was Jewish, and they were, no. He wasn't a Protestant. So she did, and we were going to get married there. But then I decided I couldn't marry him. I didn't love him.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to the apartment and I told my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Bud, I can't marry Alan." She started crying. She bawled and bawled and bawled. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I've got the shower all planned. You have to marry him." I did.
You did. Well,
I married him to keep her
well,
happy.
you can't let the shower plan go all to heck.
So I married Alan
Good.
at my parents' house, amazed. And then when school ended, we moved to California.
Uh-huh.
And that didn't last very long.
Okay.
Altogether, I was married to him about a year.
Wow.
I went to Sac State while I was there, and I graduated from Sac State.
Well, it got you to the West Coast, maybe.
Got me
You
to the
needed
West
be
Coast.
able to
We'd
do that.
originally moved to LA, because
I
I'd been
like
accepted
LA.
at
I've actually-
UCLA.
Yeah.
And I was going to finish at UCLA, but we got there, and it was too much. We didn't like LA.
What, the smog and the stuff?
No, this was back in 57, 58.
Yeah.
It was just too frenetic.
Oh.
We were living in Topanga Canyon, something like that, in my uncle's house. We were there 2 weeks and decided, mm-mm. So we headed up the valley and went to Sacramento, where I graduated. And Alan, I don't think he ever finished. But that's okay. That's neither here nor there. I left him just after a few months. And something flashed through my mind that I needed to go back. Well, I worked all the time. I was always working,
Uh-huh.
bringing in money, but that isn't what I was. Oh, I was a seeker. After high school, I started trying churches, offbeat churches, and none of them were right. So I got into, well, in high school, I got into Lao Tzu, was my entry into Eastern religions. But I couldn't find anything in Trenton that took me any further along. So I tried all the churches and they were no good. So when Alan and I moved to Sacramento, we became involved in a Unitarian church, and we studied Buddhism with one of the professors from Sac State. So an opening of other ideas.
And that also was with your husband that you were only with a year.
Right.
Yeah, so that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, right. He got me to the West Coast, got me into these things.
Right.
And he hung around. Every time I left another guy, Alan would pop up and take me out to dinner.
Oh, that's great.
Take my kids to
Yeah.
Disneyland.
So you were
and
all
stuff.
remained friends.
Yeah, we did. But let's see. After I left Alan, I got a wonderful little place to live. It's like a gardener's shack or a little cottage behind a nice house.
Mm.
And I didn't have any money. Again, like going to college, I went and said, I want to live here, but I don't have any money. But I'm going to be teaching school. I've already got a contract, and I start in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. So they let me stay there. And I started teaching school again in Roseville, California, again with special ed. And I fell in love again with the school principal.
Wasn't he married?
He was married. Bad Ann. We dated off and on. We dated a lot for a year or two. And then we both supposedly accepted contracts to teach in Reno. But when I went, he never came. He stayed back in Roseville. So I said, that's it. And he said, I'll be there next year. And he left his wife. And so we continued our relationship long distance because I was teaching in Reno. And I taught in Reno for 7 years, special ed, and then I moved, no, it was longer than that. I don't know, I taught 13 years altogether. Special ed, and then I taught junior high social studies. lived with Roy. This is the time I went through the householder period. We were married for 7 years. We adopted 2 children, 2 Eurasian kids.
This is the principal?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I was very much in love with him for the first few years. And then it began to go south.
Uh-huh.
So after about 7 years, I left him. And I was still teaching. And I pursued a place. He was, whether his ego was hurt that I left him or what, I don't know. But he ignored the kids. I mean, we'd walk down the street and see him, and the kids would say, "Daddy, Daddy," and he'd turn his back. He spread a lot of rumors about what I was doing. I was going with a black guy, I was gay, I was this, I was that. Rather than, we couldn't get along, and I tried to get him to counseling, and that he wasn't about to do that. So I knew I had to leave. Reno was not good for the kids. So I looked at several places. Oh, and during this time I was going to the Unitarian Church. But that had expanded my view. We got into some Eastern religion.
Yes,
stuff.
your exposure exposed you to things.
Right. So I finally decided to move to Portland, Oregon. I was going to move to Australia, and then I found out they didn't like Orientals there. My kids were mixed race, part Oriental. And I had a job offer in San Francisco, but in order to see, I'd have to live two hours away from my job to get a place I could afford, and I couldn't do that to the kids. So I moved to Portland, Oregon, and the time was great there. I mean, it was very hard. It was very hard, but I bought a log cabin in the woods,
Oh.
4.5 acres, on the side of Bull Mountain.
Did the kids love it?
The kids loved it. And we had a 140-acre wheat field out back.
Yeah.
So the kids had a mountain to climb, they had wheat fields behind. I had an orchard and a vineyard.
It's kind of a story of getting out of the city. Your whole
got
life has
it.
been moving out of the city,
Oh,
bit
yeah.
by bit.
And I grew most of our own food, and I froze it and I canned it.
See, I
and
told you,
dried
you
it.
should have been a farmer.
Yeah.
If you had just been
Right.
born to some farmers, it
Yeah,
all would
but
have
I
been
wasn't.
fine. Yeah.
So I had to work there. At first I got a job selling bodies, a placement agency. And I did well there, but I found out I really couldn't take it because the applicants would lie to us, the employers would lie to us, and it's like, oh, fuck, I don't like this. And I'm very active in the Unitarian Church. And again, I'm getting more exposure, and my ideas are expanding. Well, after a few months, I left that. And
I mean, you left that job.
I left that job and got involved in private nonprofits.
Yeah.
I didn't re-up my teaching certificate. In retrospect, I think I should have, but I didn't get an Oregon teaching certificate. So I had a lot of time being unemployed because the economy in Oregon at that time was chronically depressed. And when the country had a recession, we had a depression. And I was in administration of private nonprofits. And there were probably 100 of us with the same qualifications, similar qualifications, for every 10 jobs. So we played musical chairs. And I ran daycares. I ran a migrant daycare, which was wonderful. But it was only a short-term job while the migrants were there. We had 200 kids from 6 weeks to 6 years of age. Picked them up at 4 in the morning and took them back at 6 at night, and tried not only to keep them alive, but get them healthier. I loved that job. And I had 80 people working for me then. It was fabulous. But it only lasted while the migrants were there. So I worked for the YMCA as a director of a
You must be very good at applying for jobs, because you had to do it all so much.
I had to do it so much.
Yeah, you must
And
be
I
good
used
at
to,
it.
in the hard times, I'd send out 100 resumes, and I've got so I tailor-made them for what type of job I was applying for.
Gosh.
It was a nightmare. And eventually, I was out of work so long, I had to apply for, oh, no, I forgot. Then I got married again.
So,
This is a funny story. You want to hear it?
yeah, but you gotta get to, we'll need to have a conclusion in about 10 minutes or so.
Okay, anyway, I married him. I met him through the Unitarian Church. He was another school principal. I should have known from the last one.
Yeah.
That one lasted a year. And when we split, he had encouraged me to stop working and just stay home, because I'd never had that experience. And when I said, I can't do this anymore, I'm going crazy. And he left, there was no money, and I wound up on welfare, which is, I mean, I grew up in a Republican home where anybody on welfare is terrible. They're the scum of the earth. They're just lazy, blah, 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 blah. Well, I found that when I was on welfare, I became functionally retarded. My mind didn't work. I sat like a blob if I could manage to get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this buzzing, almost like a buzzing in my head saying, hang in there, you'll get through this. And I was on it for like 3 months, and then I got out, and it was okay. So, where are we?
So how
How
did you hear of Mayor Baba?
Okay. While I was in Oregon,
Okay.
well, I'd gone back to New Jersey for a year because Joe called me, and my first fiance.
Oh, the
And
first
reunited.
fiance, you were still in contact, the one that you loved.
The one that I still love.
Oh.
And now he's dead,
told-
pushing up
Oh,
daisies.
he's dead. Okay. You went back.
I went back and spent a year back in New Jersey.
Oh, well,
then
that's
I came back
lovely.
to Oregon.
That's wonderful.
Because he wasn't going to leave his wife. He had 4 kids he
Oh,
loved.
he was
He
married.
didn't love his
Oh.
wife, but he loved his kids.
Oh.
So, back in Oregon, as soon as I came back from there, I had taken I took a Living Love Institute, Ken Kesey's thing, in St. Mary's, Kentucky for a week. That expanded a lot of other things. A couple of Baba lovers here went through that too.
So then you got into drugs.
Nope,
Funny, because Casey's sort of famous for that.
Ken Kesey.
Oh, I thought that's the drug. Am I wrong? That's not an LSD name? Okay, then I don't know. This is before my
And
time.
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Now, this
okay.
was in 1980. The other 2 Baba lovers who went through his institute did it later when he moved his institute to
Okay.
Oregon.
Okay, I might be
But
mistaken.
I went back and I got involved with a spiritual group
Okay.
led by a guy named Ron Ramos,
Mhm.
who had studied with Oscar Achaza,
Mhm.
studied Eureka.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mhm.
It's written up in one of the Glow magazines. One of the Father Flanagan
Okay.
had studied with Oscar Achaza way back, but not as early as my teacher in Oregon had.
Oh.
And Baba had come to Oscar Achaza after he dropped his body in 1969. Told him to start
In a
this.
vision.
Mhm.
Okay.
Told him to start this program in the highest desert or the hottest desert in South America. And that was Arica, and that's what this program's named after. And he did, and Ron had studied with him, so he had some really good stuff. But he gave us a spiritual smorgasbord. He didn't push anything, which is wonderful. And after a year and a half, through a variety of circumstances, the whole class moved to Atlanta, Georgia to study with another teacher. And our teacher, Ron, said he was going to go too, but he stopped in San Fran to work with punk rockers.
With who?
Punk rockers.
Punk rockers, okay.
So we wind up in Atlanta in 1982, about 50 of us moved there from Oregon over a period of several months. And I didn't like this teacher at all. I didn't like him in Oregon when I'd met him, but when all my spiritual buds were moving out of the state, I couldn't stay. I mean, that was my life. So moved to Atlanta and stayed with this guy for about a year and a half. Then when I left him, I was walking down the street one day with a friend who had also come from Oregon and was still in the group, and told her I wanted to take a spiritual retreat. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I wanted to be on the coast. I didn't want it to be on the beach. I wanted to be in the woods. I didn't want a motel. I wanted a little cabin, and I couldn't spend more than $50 for the week. And she said, "Oh, it sounds like you want to go to the Baba Center." I said, "What's that?" And she said, "It's something to do with Meher Baba." Now, she's never been a Baba lover. She's been to the center since. But she always had the "Don't Worry, Be Happy" card posted by her rear door in Oregon, because it always made her smile when she went out. So she told me about it. She said, "I don't know any details, but this friend of mine from Oregon who just moved to South Carolina can give you details."
Oh, who was
so
that?
she did. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
She's probably a Baba lover, but I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
You're not showing in this.
Oh my goodness, thank you for pointing it out.
Oh, I just noticed. Anyway.
But I probably haven't for the last hour.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably.
That's all right. You're the guest.
Okay, I called the center. I called this friend and got the name of the center. Called the center, talked to Jane Haynes. She asked me all about my spiritual background, and I told her, because by then I had read voluminously Eastern literature, but hadn't come across Baba. So she said, "Okay, come ahead." I'm one of the few that ever got on center without a letter. So I came for a week and stayed 16 days. The first book Baba put in my hands, and I have no idea how else it got in my hand other than that, was God Speaks.
It's a lot.
Partway through God Speaks, I knew my search was over,
Wow.
and the real work could begin.
Wow.
But by then, I considered myself an atheist agnostic,
Yeah.
didn't buy the idea of
Yeah, well,
God.
that's consistent with Meher Baba. Did you know that?
No,
Yeah, Baba doesn't believe that there's any other entity, because there's only one entity. So there
Right,
is no,
it's-
there is
no
like the,
outside
well, yeah,
being.
like the
Yeah.
expression. Do you believe that there's a God? That's a leftover from the idea of gods. It's the whole idea of something separate from the world.
you're right, you're right.
So we don't have a God that's invisible, that's separate from
Right.
anything, because it's all
It's all
inclusive.
one.
So therefore, in that sense, it's funny. I'm not saying Baba says there's no God. It's
Right,
just that
I know.
it's so different in
Yeah.
that it's all inclusive, that it's as if there isn't a God. You know,
And
there's
yeah.
just God, which is different than there being a God.
And-
So it's like
yeah.
consistent with atheism at the same time it's
Right.
consistent with.
Agnosticism.
Yeah, it's really consistent with all of them.
Yeah.
Even though you would call it theist,
Right.
almost not,
Yeah.
because it doesn't mean a god.
Right, not somebody out
Yes,
there.
right. A god insinuates a god.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
separate from the world
Okay.
and people and us and our consciousness.
Yeah. So it took me a couple years
But
before
you had to realize that
that
process.
came okay. I didn't work on it.
Yeah.
But I bought every Baba book that was available.
Uh-huh.
I got involved with the Atlanta Baba group right after I left the center.
Uh-huh.
But the funny thing about this, I say funny, there were several funny things. I had put out to Jerry Ann, I could only spend $50 for the week.
Mm.
Well, when I checked out, the cost on center was $7 a night. For the first week, it went up to $8
Oh.
on the eighth
That's-
night, which is Baba's humor. Then I got home, and I had a call on my answering machine that
Yeah.
led to permanent employment until I retired.
Ah.
A job that
Ah.
paid enough that I could buy a
Wow.
house here.
The search for a job to do,
mean,
not just your search, but your search for a job
Well,
was
I
over.
I had been unemployed for 4 years when I
Sure.
came to the center.
Yeah.
2 years in
Right.
Oregon and 2 years
Uh-huh.
in,
And right. Oh. Well,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
I didn't believe it was God.
So
I
then
didn't ask him.
the rest of the story was simpler, would be so because it was one job, one master,
Right.
and one place. Have you been here ever since? You haven't been here ever since. Because
No, I had to
that
wait
was
till
in
I
the
retired.
80s.
That was,
Oh, you waited till you retired.
yeah, he got me, he got me in '84.
Okay.
Then I went to India 4 times.
Uh-huh.
But the job he got me with
Yeah.
the Atlanta Journal-Constitution,
Yeah.
where I was my own boss. I was
Yeah.
running the newspaper and education department.
Uh-huh.
And that meant we taught teachers all over the state of Georgia.
Oh, perfect.
So I wrote curriculum. I went out to do
It was
workshops.
an interesting job. It wasn't just a job.
It was very interesting, and
Uh-huh.
because the teachers were only available evenings or weekends, and yet I had a lot of office work to do,
You know.
writing curriculum and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
I got lots of comp time, and I came to the center almost at least
Oh,
every other
right.
month for 15 years.
Oh my goodness. So through the
Until I moved
90s,
here.
sort of like. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why you were here when I came back, because I was gone 16 years. I'd never heard of you, but you were probably coming. So, tell me, just briefly,
okay.
you've told me that you're writing a book.
Yes,
And what is that about? And I know you don't have a deadline.
I have a title,
You have a title.
Love Calls Me West, which is what Baba sent in a telegram to Malcolm Schloss, that he was going to come to the retreat. He was coming to the West. And it's the story of Baba's involvement in the West.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful title. It's
And-
very intriguing.
Yeah.
Love calls
And
me
it
West.
talks about, starts out with a lot in England. Well, it starts out in 28, but it really starts out with the Big Bang. I'm going to cover a little bit of other stuff.
Quickly, we get to the Big Bang to 1928.
Well, for the Big Bang, then history of the Grand Strand, some of it, and
Okay.
leading up to Myrtle Beach, and then Baba coming, because the focus of the book, the main section is going to be the development of the center.
I see. So it's Love Comes West to the center. How did he manage to come? Because that's, I guess.
Well, that will be in it, but
Yeah.
Love Calls Me West
Right.
is, there's only a word, I think his telegram said,
That
Love
actually
Calls Me
said
to
it.
the West.
That's what the telegram said. That's wonderful. Yeah. It'd be wonderful if you had a picture of the telegram.
Ooh, I wonder if they have it at the archives.
No, I'm sure. But you know what? They have so much of the archives they wouldn't be able to find it.
Probably.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris.
And I'm so sorry that I leaned back like this. I think I was out of it like for an hour. There was just no Chris. But that's okay.
Well, neither one of us were looking at the screen.
Right. Good for us. And I'm always learning. I'm always learning something. So, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jay Baba.
Jay Bob.